So I'm going to kind of go on a little bit into the business aspect of this, and I know we could carry on with this conversation forever, but a couple of questions have always been troubling me. Right, one is the fact that in a world where data begets more data, better data begets better algorithms begets more data collection, and so it's a loop. Do you think the divide between the data rich companies, the data giants, and their ability to therefore compete, whether it's like, the traditional, what people talk about on the internet companies, or large players like the MasterCards, the Ant Financials, etc., versus the rest of the companies in the world, is it going to widen? Or do you ever see that the smaller guys have a chance of fighting back in this?
So terrific question. And again, without taking names, right? So what we think of large data rich companies might not axiomatically be the big companies by size, right? There's so many other companies. So there are 2 or 3 levels of data that we can think about, right? That is macro data that is easily accessible to a lot of people, right? The size of the company doesn't matter in terms of macro data. In fact, some of the more recent companies tend to have as much of better macro data because they've gotten more sophisticated at collecting that. This is publicly available data, and it is stunning how much of data is publicly available. Whether you look at economic data, whether you look at other kinds of data, lots of it is. So macro data, I think the size, company size does not matter. Where it begins to matter, and I think that divide will disappear soon, is to actually build a good data practice requires a lot of infrastructure. Right? So for a minute, park aside this governance thing that I told you. Governance comes from how you set up your own culture, data culture, and it comes as a trait. It is a leadership and it's a management trait. Right? If you don't have it, you don't have it. If you have it, you have it. So park that aside. But if you take that aside, and I do think in future hiring will actually start mapping data culture, also people's data culture, to the needs of the organization's data culture. So how hiring will change is a topic for another day. But if you look at data itself, there is an enormous amount of infrastructure that needs to be built to be actually good at building a data practice, right? Now, the good news, bad news part of that is there's some people who are ahead in building that infrastructure. There's some people who are behind. My belief is that over a period of time, technology will make the cost of building that infrastructure not a big discriminant. It will not make it a big discriminant, right? So that goes to the third level, which is the data of individuals, right? What matters is the data of individuals. That discriminant will also be completely dependent, and they could appear or disappear based on your brand and trust. It has nothing to do with the size of the company. I would permission my data. I continue to believe that permission data is what is going to happen in the future. And your brand, as it relates to data, most companies do not define data ethics and data principles as a brand pillar, right? It is again surprising into how companies define their brand pillars. It'll happen in our lifetime.
I think it's already happening, right? Apple's made a big deal about the fact that, I think it's the first brand literally to go out there and say we are very conscious. We're not like the other companies.
Other companies like ours who put that out, but it is still a small sample. But what I would say is that the discriminant is going to be permission data. Permission data is based on trust and belief, and that has nothing to do with the size of the company. So if people just think that because we are big, we'll sit on a large trove of data, that is a mistake. And if people believe that they can sit on a large trove of data beyond building the trust on the brand pillar of how data is used, that is also going to be a mistake. So I do not buy into this that, size may have something to do with it, size may have nothing to do with it. It has simply to do with access to macro data. It has to do with cost of a data infrastructure, and it has to do with people's trust in your brand, small or big.